you also his president support. We are bringing the mic to you.
Oh, by some.
Viva ANC, viva! Viva SACP, viva! Viva Kusatu, viva! Viva Women's League, viva! Amandla! Amandla! Thank you, Comrade Program Director. Let me first acknowledge Comrade Soli, our DJS, Comrade, the Provincial Secretary of SACP, the Alliance partners, you all as leaders and as voters that have found your way to this very important lecture. I think for a long time, our rural areas was neglected in terms of political lecture. And an uneducated leader in a revolution is a very dangerous leader. So thank you, Comrade Benson, for bringing this lecturer to Cederbeck. The expectation is that we will also extend it to Matsikama and the other areas in West Coast. It is our responsibility as leaders to build the SACP, and we all know the SACP is the vanguard of the workers. I will not repeat what the previous speaker has said. I think, therefore, we have Comrade Soli that will lecture us. I just want to say to comrades, let us not be divided as leaders in this campaign. The ANC is us, and us is the ANC. We have experienced for a long time when this municipality was under DA. We have experience in Western Cape in the whole, the experience of being governed by a DA. And we know that the DA is neglecting giving service to our rural areas, to our minority areas. So comrades, in this local government election, it is very important that we have to unite as leaders, no matter what your color is here in this revolution. Let's support each other. And I heard the call, comrades. When we are in power, don't forget these comrades that have contributed. We are in one revolution, and the ANC is the only party that can change the social, economic conditions of our community. So let's rally behind the ANC in this local government election. And on the 1st of November, we are voting ANC so that all municipalities can be under ANC governance. I thank you, Speaker.
In socialism.
Viva YCL, viva! Viva YCL, viva! Viva ANC Youth League, viva! Viva ANC Youth League, viva! Qina mhlali, qina! Qina mhlali, qina! Viva Sanko, viva! Viva Sanko, viva! Hansi nge-corruption phansi! Hansi ngoxhaphazo lwabasebenzi phansi! Hansi ngoxhaphazo lwabasebenzi phansi! Phambili nge-socialism phambili! Long live the undying spirit of Henry Gwala, long live! Long live the undying spirit of Henry Gwala, long live! Thank you very much, Comrade Chair. Kabane Umbalo, the district chair of our party, who is also an RSC member of the ANC, the designator of our party, Comrade Lucky, and the entire executive, Comrade Treasurer Sibonile Bhakabhaka. Ingxaki yakho ndibhakabhaka. The leadership of the alliance, the labor movement, sisondela apha because kune-official recording. The leadership of the alliance and the labor movement in particular, the regional secretary of the NUM, Comrade Soso, the treasurer, Comrade Tafeni, the NUM chair, for youth structure, Comrade Mlo, the provincial chair, of course, of Bobku, Ukabane Fling. Bobku is a union, and I did SACP. So I'm a shop steward, and I remain a shop steward. Comrades, the local leadership of the ANC, I see comrades I was with in the student movement, Comrade Mike Mzangomo, and Savannah Wisasko. And many other leaders, and importantly, the number one of the municipality, Comrade Sylvia Kunda, the number two, the speaker of the chief whip. Yes. Oh, the chief whip. Oh, okay. The chief whip of the ANC in our municipality was also a ward candidate. Ukabane Francois. I think it's worth acknowledging also the presence of Arthur Gleba from Ward 9, Saldanha. Our first deputy general secretary, Comrade Solima Paila. Comrades, briefly, Utaman introduced Sola, and as I'm introducing because you all know your leader. You elected him at Congress. Not for the first time, but I think I must make the following remarks. That, and I think Mansalo did Chris and the Red Brigades are here today, and ANC volunteers. Is going to present a lecture. A lecture on the Centenary Party, as well as the October 2021-2022, in memory of Comrade Harry Gwala, Umtomdala. This lecture must help us to deepen our grasp of the theory of our revolution. Because Red Brigades, Christian Red Brigades, who are frontline activists of our party, ought to be armed with revolutionary theory. Otherwise, by danger, with revolution, with society, and after this Red October, after this launch, after this event, these Red Brigades must continue with their work. I think, comrades, I must indicate that our deputy chair, Comrade Sofoya, is here, Umantuli. And the PC members, Comrade Mcebisi Mnconywa, who is the convener of all PC deployees, and Comrade Pam Harris, abazanga apa tailing Comrade Soli or myself. They have been here, Comrade Soli. They don't wait for any leader to come. They work here in this district. Comrades, Sisuke Bandui. And before we conclude this session, we must get feedback as to how many people have stated nabo, bangapi. How many households did we reach? And certain under bangapi, bati. And what is obtaining from the ground. But one of the realities, and I think it's important, Comrade Sylvia and Comrade Ace, the branch secretary of our party, that IPATI is its vanguard role in this farm area, in this rural area. And consider building the unity yabasebenzi irrespective of their nationality. What we found from the ground is the dominance yabasebenzi abasuka kwelinye ilizwe. Baninzi. And here is the danger. Here is the danger. Under capitalism, as capitalism continues to revolutionize itself, it fragments us as the working class and divides us. Now, kubalulekile the Communist Party to be in the forefront of the unity of workers, whether they are from here local or they are from other countries. If we don't do that, workers from other candidates who are here, Abakabane, Usoltak, and others, Nokabane Ukunda. Here is the message. The first thing I must raise is that what candidates must not leave their wards. From now, this is not your last event outside your ward. What candidates must be in their wards full time. Because our campaign, Gumtu Emtui, right? And it's a campaigner 24/7. That's the first thing. The second thing, comrades, today the ANC and our people, actually you are people's candidates on the basis that the broader community participated on your nomination and you were endorsed. You are given that name. On the 1st of November, you are going to be given a new name called public representative. That is as a councillor. Now, for the ANC to continue to lead Kabalukunda, to continue lead, it will depend on the behavior, the attitude, the ethics of its public representatives. If you go to municipalities and still you become lazy. You don't go to our people. Our people are not going to vote the ANC back and are not going to vote you back. And as members of the ANC, we are not going to raise our hands to nominate you again. Savan? Enye into which I think is important. ANC ayifuna ngabanye on the basis of the behavior and the conduct of those we deploy to the state. Because when they get there, they become corrupt and steal money meant for our people. All of you, Makabane, here who are ward candidates, those who are here and those who are in another important program of our movement in Saldanha, you are not made by any individual as a candidate. You are made by the ANC and the people. Nobody, no one must go around and claim to have made you, Francois, as a candidate. And no one must go around to collect monies from you on the basis that he or she claims to have made you a candidate. We must expose and isolate all opportunists and extortionists who go around collect monies from government officials, from public representatives, claiming to be fundraising for our movement. We must expose them. They do not belong to the ANC. Comrades, loyalty, commitment, and love for the movement get tested and seen when one is no longer deployed. Loyalty, commitment, and love for our movement and our people get tested when one is no longer deployed as a public representative. Siyayibona ke loo nto because those who could not make it, abanye are disengaging, are not campaigning, abanye defected to other parties. We must allow them, they are going to come back. When they come back, they must join the ANC, not factions. Not factions. And we want to warn comrades that, yes, there is no money for the movement. These elections are the most difficult because you only have less than 40 days to campaign, yet there is no money. There are no food for volunteers. There are no t-shirts for volunteers. But Comrade Mike, I will have a problem, comrades. If after these elections, when we go to regional, provincial, and national conferences, yet there is money, I will have a problem. Commodities come and sold. They are going to be sold and bought. They will be sleeping in expensive hotels and driving hired cars because they are delegates. It's so bad. Let me invite comrades, the SACPs. Yabona ke ndizimdela into ba ukwembe zoli organize. Yabona you organize. Let me introduce to you, because Gombe Zoli became the national organizer of the SACP for years, before he was elected to the Central Committee. But before that, Gombe Zoli ngawamanye amaqabane ayese-exile, elwela inkululeko yeli lizwe. Now, yabona ke, the difference between instant leadership and organic leadership. When they go to events, they arrive on time, right? In many instances, become the first to arrive and become the last to leave because he is not a celebrity, as when he bullies and adulate flight. And that makes one to understand the organization he is leading. It's difficult, and the caliber of membership anayo. what it takes to organize an event in a farm area such as Satrastar. He arrived here at 9:20. The event was scheduled to start at 10. Many of you unamkele. Now, this is the person I'm introducing. Come as is our first Deputy General Secretary, serving the SACP full time. Olwayo oyiconfrontayo attendance. Oyiconfrontayo attendance. Leading the Communist Party as our General Secretary is in the state, deployed by this party of ours, by ourselves. And Solly I'm introducing has been playing a leading role to see to it that there is no void of leadership in the Communist Party. Solly, here are your Red Brigades. Here are volunteers of the ANC. Here are Christian Red Brigades. These Red Brigades have been campaigning since we started elections. Talk to them and say anything to them. And after this, they will go back to their wards and continue campaigning for the ANC. Here is your membership. Here is your Christian Red Brigades. Talk to them.
Mandla. All power. Krach. Viva SACP, viva! Viva! Viva ANC, viva! Viva! Viva COSATU, viva! Viva! Viva SANCO, viva! Viva! Viva YCL, viva! Viva! Viva ANC Youth League, viva! Viva ANC Women's League, viva! Viva! Viva MKMPA, viva! Viva! Amandla! Gwala, long live. Comrade Chair, thank you very much. Comrade Mbalo, our district chair, and greetings to your leadership collective, led by Comrade Lucky, our district secretary, and all our members, our branch, and our members in this district, and those who are here from other areas. Our provincial Secretary, Comrade Benson, as well as our Provincial Deputy Chairperson, Comrade Sofoia. Thank you very much, first for defeating COVID-19. Upu Sofoia. Yes, thank you for a good fight. You scared us, but we had always had confidence that you will win. And Siyabonga, we lost many comrades. You thought for us at our tip level, and had you not fought, we'll be finished. Siyabonga kutubili. Let me greet the mayor, Comrade Sylvia, who we worked with this morning in the community here. I must say, Comrade Nopala, she's a popular mayor. Yeah, she's a popular mayor of the masses. The masses love her. And there's one observation I made, because even kids were greeting her. She's rooted amongst the community. We appreciate that, Comrade Sylvia. Don't stop it when you are back as the mayor. Keep it up like that. Stay with your community. Manguli say leadership in Gogel Zetu as we are go on the Amasondo Soto, the Kosatu, Kumafile Itasugen, Ukombre to Soso. I won't say much, Comrade Soso. Ngoba ngabethwa for that kodwa into engifuna ukuyisho kuba siyabulela mhlekazi usala ukhona ukhokhela abasebenzi. You understand ukuthi leading the mine workers is a strategic task in our revolution, particularly in industrial sector unions. Ngibulisa uComrade uFlink, leader yethu phaku Popcro, appreciating equally what Popcro has done for us as the Communist Party. We appreciate that, Comrade Flink. And all our candidate, Comrade Francois, who also serves in the municipality as the chief whip of our party, the movement. We appreciate your presence here as well. Now, comrades, we're going to have a brief discussion about Comrade Gwala. But before that, let me appreciate that we are in a district named Ernesto Che Guevara de la Sena. That was our people's commander and leader of the Cuban Revolution, who was killed in Bolivia by the American government, agents of the CIA, working together with the reactionary government, the imbecile government of Bolivia at the time. Today, Bolivia is led by the progressive forces. They've recovered their country. They've honored the memory of Comrade Che Guevara. He was killed, officially we recognize the 8th of October. So it's an international day of celebration, of commemorating his undying legacy. Because Che Guevara was a different revolutionary. He showed to us that we can change the world by our example. He revitalized the examples of many other revolutionaries, namely Simon Bolivar, the liberator. Simon Bolivar is the only revolutionary we characterize and call the liberator. Otherwise, all revolutionaries work amongst the masses to liberate themselves. So the masses liberate themselves. But Simon Bolivar liberated 9 countries in Latin America. That's why we call him the liberator. He fought in battles in the front line directly himself on a moon. Of these massive revolutionaries, José Martí from Cuba, many others on the African continent who fought gallantly. But they set an unfailing example of what a revolution is about. As you know, Che Guevara was an Argentinian by birth, but he fought in different countries. He fought in Panama. And unfortunately, when the government of Albanese was disposed again by the CIA, that is by the imperialist America, at that time there was a coup. He then left for Mexico. That's where he met Fidel Castro. In fact, the first person he met, of course in Panama he met Comrade Risquet, who's late now. Risquet was the leader of the Cuban Communist Party who attended our 7th Party Congress in Cuba, leading the Cuban delegation. He's the one that negotiated with the apartheid regime about Angola, their withdrawal in Angola. And also led the team from Cuba that participated in the liberation of Congo-Brazzaville. When Che Guevara came to fight in Africa in the Congo DRC, Comrade Risquet went into Congo-Brazzaville. So he's the first Cuban to meet Che Guevara in Panama. There were student leaders at the time. Risquet had run away from Cuba after the failed unrest with Fidel Castro and them in the July 26 movement when they were still students. But Che will then join Fidel Castro in Mexico after meeting Raul Castro. Raul Castro, who was the real motto of the Cuban Revolution, the real ideologue. Raul Castro was already a trained young communist, a trained ideologue, a communist before his brother Fidel became a communist. So that's why they had a good link with Che Guevara, who was a medical doctor, by the way. Then they joined the mission from Mexico to Cuba, using a small ship, a yacht, they called the Grandma. Only 82 of them, almost all combatants. It was good that Che Guevara was a medical doctor. He became the doctor of the team. But because of his abilities, he became one of the fighters of the Cuban Revolution. And Fidel Castro declared him the first commander of the Cuban Revolution in battles. So in other words, Comrade Lucky, I will say, I dare say, no one comes closer to Che Guevara and Fidel. There are men who can aspire to that level, at least in some of our generations. There are those like Krizani, who was called by many people in the region as the chair of Guevara of the African continent. There are others whose lives were cut short like Patrice Lumumba of the DRC and Thomas Sankara of Guinea-Bissau, Burkina Faso. He changed that. Burkina Faso means a country of upright people, a country of people who respect themselves, incorruptible people, a country of people with high morals. All of these were revolutionaries. That's why when Che Guevara fought in Cuba, when he joined Fidel, after being introduced by Raul, he said to Fidel, I will join your revolution provided you will allow me to live and assist other countries when the need arises. And Fidel gave him the pledge. So later on, when the Cuban Revolution was successful, he was a minister of state. He was in charge of trade and industry, even the National Reserve Bank. He will allocate a day in a month or in a week, depending on the schedule, to go and join the workers in the plantations. This is the Minister of State. So the Cubans and the Cuban Revolution taught us that we can change things, do things differently, not allow the concept of protocol to inhibit our abilities as revolutionaries. But when the time came, he asked that he joined the people of the DRC, of Zaire at the time, after the killing of Patrice Lumumba by Mobutu Sese Seko and the CIA, the Americans. The Americans have been bad to us. They've been bad to revolutionaries. They've been bad to people's struggles. They sponsored that Mobutu Sese Seko, together with the Belgian government, which ultimately killed no less than 11 million Congolese. One of the greatest genocide on earth, which is not spoken about because it happens to Africans. And Che decided that, he told Fidel that now is the time to go and help the people of Zaire. Lumumba, he joined Comrade Kabila, Laurent Kabila. The struggle was tough. He set up a guerrilla machinery in the Zaire. It didn't work out. He went back to Cuba to prepare another mission to go and liberate Bolivia. That's where he died on the 8th of October, 1965. On the 9th of October, officially was declared internationally by the government of Bolivia at the time, the reactionary government of Bolivia, that they've killed Che. He fought in the battle before he died. They captured him after he was wounded. And his machine gun, the M2 that he was using, has ceased to work. That's how he was captured. But he was a gallant hero and a gallant combatant of the working class, represented Cuba in many platforms across the world, in particular at the United Nations. And therefore, like you are leading a strategic district with a strategic name in the revolution. It's not a name just to name your branch or a district for nothing. It's a heavy name. This comrade, one of the best we have. Now, comrades, let me appreciate this opportunity to talk about Umtomdala, Comrade Themba Gwala, the roaring lion of the Midlands. And I must say that when I was told that I have to do a presentation on Gwala, I was asking myself, in the context of the conditions that we are in now today, how is it possible to speak clearly about Umtomdala? And I must really say, Comrade Nopala, you put me in a very difficult predicament or difficult situation. Bengazi ukuthi ngizawuqala phi. Because okokuqala Gwala spoke his mind clearly and was a communist through and through. He less considered many tactics that weakened the strategy of the movement, including that of the Communist Party. So in other words, he was not much a man of tactics. He was much a man of principles. That principles of the revolution should be applied anytime, anywhere, anyhow. Yes. And yet, we learn in Marxism that we don't struggle under conditions of our own. The conditions are imposed on us by a variety of circumstances and reasons. And therefore, we can then have adaptability, utilize tactics to cross a particular problem and so forth, but not over-rely on tactics that accumulatively become strategy. Because then you miss and you lose your strategic objective, because you have been pursuing tactics. And as you pursue a tactic, it becomes correct. It continues to become correct and ultimately deviate from the major strategic framework. And that's why we have to be tactical or strategic about tactics. So in other words, subject your tactics to the strategic mission and review them constantly. Therefore, to come here and talk about Gwala is both an honor for me in particular, as well as a privilege, because he's someone I revered as a young man in our liberation movement because of his steadfastness. We'll talk much about how the apartheid government treated him and how he sustained his political legacy and steadfastness despite the ill treatment by the apartheid regime. We are also using this moment to link our Red October campaign for this year, 2020. The Red October campaign, it's a program of the SACP that recognizes, firstly, the mammoth victory, the biggest victory of the workers in Russia in 1917 during the Red October Revolution, when workers became leaders of society, when workers became owners of the means of production, meaning that workers became owners of social wealth of society. They became owners of the economy. They determined where their economy is going. So that victory was extremely important because about 40 years earlier, workers in France during the Paris Commune, or 120 years or so earlier, they won a major victory, which they further lost because the bourgeoisie stole the victory of the workers from their hands. Now, we are therefore recognizing the Red October campaign. Every year we pick up a particular issue that affects the working class to be our main focus of our Red October campaign. And our Red October campaigns in South Africa, in the context of our struggle, has achieved much. For instance, as an example, we launched a campaign for the transformation of the financial sector. That campaign was fighting against the banks excluding the working class, the black majority, Africans in particular, from accessing credit. They were blacklisting our townships and our villages and rural areas. You will not, even when you are a professional from a township, after passing having your degrees or qualifications, you will not go and get credit from the banks to establish your own enterprise because they looked at where you come from. They redlined or blacklisted our communities and blacklisted our individuals. So we fought, for instance, to expose even this thing called the credit bureau. At some point, we even thought that this credit bureau is one big thing. We found that there were about 18 credit bureaus, all working together in every sector of the economy. Their main mission to make sure that the working class is largely managed on how they access credit. And they gave you credit with such massive repayment interest that they were killing interest. We launched that campaign. It's still there. But that campaign achieved one of the greatest successes. We made banking accessible and financial services accessible to the people. We created what we call Mzansi account. Unfortunately, Mzansi account could not be established by the Communist Party. It was established by the banks. But Mzansi account became the single biggest account across all the banks. Because all the banks, for instance, Standard Bank had Mzansi account, FNB had Mzansi account, Nedbank had Mzansi account, ABSA had Mzansi account, everyone had Mzansi account. Post Office created Mzansi account. Mzansi account was therefore a bank of the poor or of the working class. That they didn't have to ask you all these things, where you are working and so forth. All you needed was to produce your ID and you'll be given a bank account. It was a victory of the Communist Party. For people who don't understand the economy, they don't think this was an important victory. For us, it was an extremely critical victory. But the biggest victory becomes when the people own their own banks, when they create and own their banks. That becomes the biggest victory. That is why even now, we are still fighting and ensuring that our government can create their own state bank and stop this thing of continuing to give money to private banks, commercial banks as we call them. And therefore, we need to work together with our trade unions in particular. For instance, I was having a discussion, Comrade Soso, with the new CEO of UBank, the Union Bank. UBank is called the Union Bank. It's a bank of the workers, owned by the NUM or Mine Workers Trust. They are under threat to be acquired by some bank called Access Bank and some other institutions. There's African Bank that is up for sale. Yet the government owns the South African Reserve Bank owns 50% of African Bank. PIC, 25%. Already, this is a public bank. And yet we want to sell it back to big capital. So those are things that we say we can handle and create financial institutions. You cannot own the economy without owning the financial means of the economy. In our country, for instance, our economy is even financialized. In other words, financial capital is the dominant economy in our aggregate economy. They own sometimes this financial capital. They own mines, they own construction companies, they own all different sectors of the economy. So now, instead of them funding people in the different sectors, when you go there to put a proposal for business, they want a share as guarantee that this thing will succeed and as a guarantee for them to fund. So our economy is financialized. We therefore need to own financial instruments in the hands of the people. This is just about some few. I'm just talking about some of the campaigns of the Communist Party through the Red October campaign. One of them is the national health insurance. We brought it up, the national health insurance. And sometimes because the party's nature is not being boastful. You know, one day I briefed this, I reminded the leadership of the ANC in a big meeting of the top 6 of the alliance about some of these campaigns of the Communist Party. And the current president, Ramaphosa, looks at me and says, yeah, so the Communist Party, gosh, these achievements. So he was shocked even how sometimes we get treated despite this achievement by the Communist Party. We brought up the national health insurance. We didn't bring it up so that it can be a thing to play with and to say to the people who are doing something for you. Because one of the tasks of communists is to end hunger. It's a task of communists. To make sure that people are healthy, to fight diseases. It's a task of communists. And to ensure that people have got housing and water, sanitation and electricity. It's a fundamental task of all communists. And I dare say of all revolutionaries. And therefore, the national health insurance, we started it. It's adopted by the ANC. We give the ANC the glory to accept and the glory to say we are introducing the national health insurance because the ANC put it in the manifesto of the alliance. We put up the land question clearly, early on after our victory. We led a campaign called Mawubuye Umhlaba. Mawubuye Umhlaba campaign, before it was fashionable to talk about the land question. Because we understood as a Communist Party, the land is primary in every revolution, in every economy. In fact, the land is the principal determinant of property relations in society. In other words, the land determines ownership of the land or non-ownership of the land, determines whether you are poor or you are wealthy. If you don't own the land, you'll be amongst the poor. If you own the land, you are guaranteed wealth. Because all sorts of wealth of all human beings is derived from the land. So don't allow anyone that do not want you to own the land. The land is the core, is the primary. The key determinant, not only of property relations, but the key determinant of production relations. Because once you own the land and it's yours, even the production on the land is determined by you. It's not only determined by so-called investors and big capital who come and take away the land, create slaves of workers, and pay them a meager salary, a pittance slave wage, when workers give their all to the economy. In other words, communists must always wake up, because when you have the land and you have labor, you have everything. You cannot be poor when you have the land and you have labor. Labor is the source of all production. Bourgeois scholars in our universities here, I want any other professor to come down and engage with me publicly. I'll leave them naked on this one. Because bourgeois scholars say labor is a factor of production. It's untrue. Labor is the source of production, not a factor of production. All other forms of capital in the sphere of factors of production are products of labor. And that is why labor must be properly characterized as a product of human labor, all products of human labor, apart from those that are natural products. The air that we breathe, the water, the sea, the trees, the mountains, these beautiful mountains here. So therefore, this is where the terrain of struggle is located. Once you own property relations in favor of the working class, the majority, therefore you change the relations of production. In other words, you change how those who own the means of production see workers, because you are now the owners of the means of production. It's like if you own something, what you own, it's yours. That which you own cannot oppress you. That is why we have to intensify class struggle all the time. And not just accept, even when we win elections, to be administrators of status quo, administrators of unequal power relations between classes, let alone unequal power relations between men and women. This question of relations is critical, because once you own property relations, they are changed in favor of the majority, the working class, then you create new production relations where you work for yourself. It's like when you take a bath every day, you know that bathing is work. You know it, bathing is work. But you don't get paid for bathing yourself, isn't it? Why are you not getting paid for bathing for yourself? Yes, when you work for yourself, you appreciate the value of working for yourself. That's how we're going to go about when we change property relations and production relations in this country and control the wealth of society, human society, and distribute that wealth across the board to everybody. That wealth will not be distributed on the basis of elitism and bourgeois institutions and individuals who become multi-billionaires when people are starving, they can't even eat, others are dying of overeating. What kind of a contradiction of a bourgeois society? So others die of starvation, others die of obesity. That's your bourgeois world, the capitalist world. We must end that. That is why we in the communists are fighting for a classless society. I don't want to get carried away about these things, Nopala, but I was just reflecting on a few things of the necessity of this Red October campaign. There are other campaigns on public education, for instance, and several others that we have pioneered as the SACP in this regard. This year's campaign, it's focused on local government elections and making sure that our movement decisively wins this coming local government elections on the 1st of November. That's why we want all of you and your families and your friends and your colleagues to be mobilized to come out in their numbers to vote for the African National Congress. When we are voting for the African National Congress in these elections, you are also voting for the Communist Party. You are also voting for COSATU and SANCU and all our progressive mass democratic formations. But we have said in this elections campaign, there will be few things that we want to focus a little bit on. As a mandate of our government, the local state, including of national government, because it's not just a blank check from the Communist Party that will vote for you, ANC. That's why I agree with the point that you're raising, Soso. We vote in order to have political power and use that as an instrument to change the lives of our people. We did work here in an extremely difficult environment. In a squatter camp, you in government, you are no longer even calling it squatter camp. You call it informal settlement. Squatter camp, proper language. ideological language. It's squatter camps. Marx spoke about these things, about squatter camps in Cape Town, Karl Marx in Brazil, and in other parts of the world, in England. So let's not modify this thing, this language, informal settlements. It's squatter camps, because our people are living in degraded conditions. The reason for that is precisely because of capital class relations in our country. That is why our program, the National Democratic Revolution, seeks to resolve all these inequalities. Class inequality. Class inequality talks to inequality in the ownership patterns of wealth. Where, for instance, you are a worker, you earn a living through selling your labor to a capitalist who pays you a pittance salary. They pay you not enough so that you must come back tomorrow. And they exploit your labor in that process. Equally. So therefore, absolute inequality will end ultimately when we defeat capitalism. That is the real truth. Okay. That's the real truth. But it doesn't mean we can't fight all other injustices in between that. But absolute inequality will end when we defeat the capitalist system. Because the system itself is based on inequality and exploitation of the working class by the capitalist class. So we need new power relations in society, in the workplace. The same as in our condition, we need to end racial inequality. Because the colonialists who took our land created their own power, oppressed our people, including the indigenous people, the Khoi and the San, in their own land, make them pariahs in their own land, are oppressing us on a racial segregation, on a racial ground. That's why they introduced apartheid. The colonial government later on introduced the apartheid system, which formalized this racial segregation. So in the context of South Africa, our revolution is to end class inequality, to end racial inequality. How do we end racial inequality when, for instance, the people in this area in Citrusdal are led by the DA, or allow themselves to be led by the DA? When we win government, it's nominal, because they continue to control the economy, particularly in the farms and its related industries. We equally have to defeat another big enemy and inequality in our revolution, of gender inequality. That is to fight against patriarchy. Patriarchy is an offshoot of the capitalist system that creates unequal power relations between men and women. Create an impression that it's by law, it's by culture, this so-called superstructure of society. Law, culture, philosophy, ideology, and all of that. The ideology of capitalism relegate women to the lower ground, because their existence, their subsistence has been made to rely on their men. The power relations are unequal. We have to fight and defeat that. That's the task of our revolution. But this task cannot be fulfilled if the instruments of change today, which are acquired through elections, are left in reactionary organizations. In organizations that are able to buy our people because they've got money. The money that they abstracted from the oppression of our own workers, ourselves. Now this becomes a big problem. That's why we need a mass consciousness of the people. I was telling comrades yesterday in Khayelitsha about my street. It's not the best, but my street is a conscious revolutionary street in Thokoza. We mobilize from the street level. So you will require to mobilize from the street level. In other words, the consciousness of a people is not left to chance, to those who are dominantly controlling society like the bourgeoisie. Because you must always understand that Marx has once indicated that the dominant views in society are those of the ruling class. The ruling class, everywhere you go, you see their ideology. I mean, for instance, if you have an opportunity to visit a place like Cuba, one thing struck you when you are in that country. You find that there's no public advertisement of bourgeois notion. On the streets are slogans of the people, slogans about the task of today, what the people need to do, what the people have done, slogan about the revolution, those who sacrifice for the revolution. Cuba doesn't even have a single statue of Fidel Castro. Because what is important is to change people's lives. And Fidel, in his will, also wrote that he doesn't want a statue. Put that revolution into difficulty. We've been saying to this comrade, hey, can you just find a mechanism that you defy Fidel Castro in his death and do him a statue? That's why the statue in Bloemfontein of Fidel is the first statue of Fidel outside Cuba. They are focusing on something else to rebuild their country. Now, let me go back to Umpepeto, Gwala. Umpepeto, Gwala, the roaring lion of the Midlands. Wazalwa umhlaka 30 July 1920, a year before the birth of the SACP. Wafunda waze wathola a teacher's diploma from Adams College. And wafundisa Eslanspruit, where he taught one of his students, Moses Mabhida, who will also become the General Secretary of the Communist Party and commander of Umkhonto weSizwe. Umpepeto was also a revolutionary leader. In other words, he was not just a teacher, but was a revolutionary teacher. He was a trade unionist as well. He joined the ANC at the age of 24, but he joined the Communist Party in 1942, the then Communist Party of South Africa, at the age of 22. So why join the SACP before joining the ANC? That's why he was not confused in the ANC. Wangena phaya ane class identity. Ayazi ukuthi yini class interest yakhe. Mawujoyina ku social struggle, umele ube ne-interest, class interest. Awukwazi ungena nje kwa ANC ungena class interest. Uzawuthathwa umoya wonke wonke. Mawungena phaya wena une-interest ye-working class. Noma yini discusswayo wena uyibheka ukuthi i-working class ibenefita kanjani. Makuthiwa abantu uthi yes abantu kodwa kubantu kunama social classes and stratas. I-class yona ibenefita kanjani. So la kuskota camp lesesila. Kugcwele i-working class, kuhlala i-working class. So mawungena ku branch ka ANC, mawu discuss, mabathi ba discuss ini uqale nge-interest yala. Izinto zingena nini? Isewage ingena nini? I-electricity ingena nini? Amanzi angena nini? Itrata ziyenziwa nini? That's your interest of the class. So i-analysis yakho ye-society igabanishwa into esibizwa ukuthi ilihlo le-class, class prism. That's how you think. Gwala waqala ku SACP before aya ku ANC. In some other days it changed. The SACP was banned. So the easiest way to come to the struggle was through the African National Congress. At the same time, he was a trade unionist, but a trade unionist par excellence. In other words, Ubaba Gwala not only participated in the trade unions, he also built them. For instance, he set up the Rubber and Cable Workers Union in Howick, Emerisburg. And he recruited for the Communist Party at the same time. Because the Communist Party, Comrade Ben said, not the Communist Party. Now Comrade Black. The Communist Party, one of its tasks is to build the trade unions. The trade union ayekwazi ukuzakha nje siyekele kubasebenzi. It has a Communist Party to build a trade union. Sometimes ma-organize a Communist Party bawuthunyelwa kwindawo kungenayo kungekho i-trade union. Kuthiwa hamba kule ndawo sokupa 3 weeks ubuye ne-trade union. Ubuye namafomu agcwele. That is why these members, our old leaders, all of them were in the trade union. Because it was a fundamental task to build the trade unions. Because you can't win class struggle without workers. And if workers are not conscientized, they can actually go with the reactionary forces of capital, even defeat progressive ideas. That is why the communists must go to the workers, engage them, recruit them into trade unions. All leaders of the trade unions must have come through the political school of the Communist Party to be strengthened ideologically, to understand why they are in the struggle. Akunakuthi maqabani ungene ku revolution uhambe nje nayiphi direction. I-revolution yethu, for instance, at the moment, Comrade Benson, I must say, that's why we put me in a difficult condition, because ngikhuluma kanjani ngoHenry Gwala ngakhulumi nge-status se-revolution yethu namhlanje. Our revolution is in crisis. It's even in a point of stagnation. And part of this stagnation is because the revolutionaries have sometimes taken too long to make strategic interventions even when they've got power in their hands. Power, maqabani, akusinto yokudlala ngayo. Mawuphethe power, bengikhuluma noComrade uSylvia, ngithe bangakususi as mayor. Ukubona i-orientation yakho ikahle. But I have said, if you come back as a mayor, ngifuna ukuhlangana nawe nomphakathi wala one day, sikhulume nge-self-reliance and how the people must support the people here in the municipality and talk about what we call the local state. Because the local government is nothing else but a local state. It takes decisions. That's why when umfowethu sike sasebenza naye ku-Communist Party, uComrade uwayini wafika phaya eNelson Mandela Metro awumeya ka-ANC abuya kuKhosatu. The whole country is a debater whether to ban or not ban i-labor brokers. Kwangena kumele address executive mayor wathi no, i-labor brokers ngiyayiphelisa la ekumetro yami. Wayiphelisa, simple. Sithi hey, we are having all these big debates at national level. If we do this, the bourgeoisie will react this way. They will take us to court like they did in Namibia. Then they can lock out workers. We will have a different labor relations regime in the country that cannot protect workers. Therefore, let's delay it. Let's handle it this way and that way. While we are figuring we are better than municipality. Revolutionary. That's how revolutionaries must act. Let's be decisive on the side of the masses, not be decisive only when it benefits capital. And if we work hard to be amongst the people and they know we'll be decisive on their side, they will always be with us and they will always be mobilized. But if secretaries at the whim of the cry of capital, we look the other way. I-capital izawusidelela njengoba isidelela namhlanje. South African capital has become belligerent and even arrogant. It must be confronted directly. We've got state power at national level. We say as a Communist Party, let's find mechanism to discipline capital. Sometimes I think it's a soft word, no part. Because the capital has become rogue in this country. Iyadelela. So therefore, we need to find mechanism to engage with capital in such a way that it respects people's power, it respects democracy, the will of the people. That the people entrust on us as public representatives through our movement, the ANC, to change their lives. You have now, for instance, we compete easily. EDA, easy pamandla. In the name of democracy, is it amongst the poor, in nominate individuals what to high democratic right, nami ngiyastanda ngimela DA. A party that doesn't ever fight for the interests of the poor. Because as mobilize umphakathi analyze lama parties are. But I can tell you, not in my voting district. Our reactionary forces will never get a single vote. Ukhona inhlangano la ngeke ngibize ngegama, ike yathola ivote one day. I-community yami yayobiza umhlangano. Kuthi le vote ize kanjani in our area. Yeah. I-mass power le. Babiza inhlangano kuzodiscussa lento yokuthi i-vote le iza kanjani. And umuntu wakhona watholakala. Wayodiscusswa naye kahle nje kwathiwa hayi yabona le area kufe abantu abaningi balela inkululeko yesizwe. Labantu laba asizoba betrayer. Lana ngifuna ukubonisa something maqabani ngoba nina lento revolution sometimes anithathi kahle. Yabona la kuse strateni sami ispaza shops ase strateni sami. Phakathi espaza shop kune flag le Samco, kune flag le Consultu, kune flag le ANC, kune flag lomkhonto wesizwe. Beneath the flag lomkhonto wesizwe iflag le SACP. Ngize ngiluswa lo mfokita wena wawubekele impuphu la isitha iflag le SACP uthi hayi SACP kabili buka la at the corner kune flag ehlobiwe SACP phakathi espaza shop ku strategi sami. Akudlalwa ngepower, sidila nge-local street organization. Sine street committee that deals with social problems at the street level. Sine street burial society. Sine street bursary scheme. We live on revolutionary principles of solidarity and empathy. We look after one another. This is our street. There are other political organizations in our street, but the movement is dominant. Kunomfo estrategi sami 3 houses from my place, umdlalento uya ku PAC. Sometimes bekacela ku strategy votelani mina as a ward candidate. Istrata sathi umdlalento asifuna ukudlala ngepower yethu, ngamandla wethu. Sifuna ukuconsolidate ipower yabantu ukuthi bayazi ukuthi inkululeko yini. Kuno brother kababa uMthupeng uZep Mthupeng lo beka president ye-PAC in my street. My younger brother actually belonged to the PAC, even to APLA. But when it comes to collective decisions of my street, a movement led by the ANC is dominant. They are engaged with Glasa Strat. Ngicela ke maqabani ni mobilize at the street level. Ayikho revolution is our defender at helicopter level lephezulu. A revolution is defender from the street level amongst the masses. Namanje njengoba ngikhuluma kanje namhlanje Saturday kupaintwa istrata sami every year ngama elections. I decision yestrata. Sipainta ngama colors we movement. Nama flag we movement. Uhamba estrateni nasi na iflag ye SACP. Ibhaliwe. Ayifika Uzayithini people's power. That's how it must be. So we need new forms of mobilization as a movement. And we can follow this path, Kababu Gwala, who organized across, he built SACP and other trade unions. He recruited for MK, for instance. For instance, Ubabu Stalin Mtshali, wangitshela mina directly in interviewer, ukuthi he recruited not only for MK, but his unit, Ubabu Mtshali's unit, MK, was reporting to Ubabu Gwala. So he was deeply involved in all sections of our movement, building the ANC, building the Communist Party, building the trade unions, building Umkhonto weSizwe. At the same time, he also led the local football association. Yabona, for instance, one thing that ngibonile la, angifuni ni misunderstand. Mangihamba la emphakathini. Ngibonile ukuthi lo mphakathi parties. Yeah, we are parties. They party. The people, the social gatherings of the masses are heightened. It's nature a class, working class. Working class must relax away from the exploitation by capital in the few days that they are off from work. Then, when the working class parties, the movement must be there with them. So in other words, we need social reorganization of the movement to be amongst the class. The working class, my party, ithatha ngani? Conclude ukuthi if thina singekho siphathisha now. In my area, from the 80s, we used to say after every meeting, siyahlangana singamaqabane nomphakathi and have fun nomphakathi and disseminate our ideas kumphakathi. So you can't have umphakathi that parties on its own with a culture, if you like, a runaway culture. A culture that can accept or can integrate the highest values of humanity, of the revolution, of those who sacrifice their lives for that society to be free. So you have to integrate these things. And therefore, that is why when you look at his life, Gwala, he integrated up to sports level. Although he was a teacher on the one hand, he also, by the way, got arrested and sent to Robben Island by the apartheid regime. He served in Robben Island 2 terms. The first was from 1964 to 1972. And he was released and restricted to Pietermaritzburg. And later on was denied to work by the apartheid regime. Instead, when they denied him to work, he went to organize the trade unions, build organs of people's power. And after the 1975 worker strike, Comrade Gwala was arrested again and charged under the Terrorism Act and sent again to life imprisonment on Robben Island, where he ultimately spent 19 years in apartheid jails for furthering the aims of the African National Congress. He lost his wife, Umam Elder, when he was in prison and was not even allowed to attend her funeral. He suffered the motor neuron disease that affected the use of his arms when he was in prison, and was therefore released to the care of his family in November 1988. But the apartheid regime thought that they would destroy his fighting spirit, and they dismally failed, because his ideology was like steel. He was a man of steel. Ideology yakhe yayiqinile, beangathengisi and azange athengise. In 1991, when the movement was unbanned, He was elected into the NEC of the ANC and also the Central Committee of the South African Communist Party. And after 1994 democratic breakthrough, served in the KwaZulu-Natal legislature as the chief whip of the ANC. He passed on the 20th of June 1995 of a heart attack. He was age 74. This year, he would have been 101 years. Last year was his centenary. But the most important thing, if you want to learn about Harry Gwala, is to learn about him post-prison, after he was released. Because before prison, there's a man that I needed to have spoken about, Bruno Mtolo. He was in the unit Gabu Stalin. Bruno Mtolo was the one we characterized in the movement as Mr. X, or the first Mr. X. That was the first apartheid spy against the liberation movement. He exposed the MK operations, the unit Comrade Stalin that destroyed the Durban post office through a bomb. He's the one that also sold out President Nelson Mandela at Howick, exposed his movement. He is partly one of the people responsible for the earlier arrest of Umuntu Mdala. But it's important that post-1994, Harry Gwala finds himself in the midst of a raging war affecting his people in the Midlands. And as expected, he mobilized the youth and the whole of the community to defend themselves against the apartheid-sponsored violence unleashed by impies in coordination with the police. This violence was characterized by mass attacks on helpless communities, and its peak was around 1990. For instance, in Maritzburg, between March 25 and March 31 of 1990, there was what we call the 7-day war, where over 200 people died. And this displaced more than 20,000 people according to the TRC records. And later on, the rest of Pietermaritzburg region had over 1,145 people who died because of what is characterized as political violence. This was 3 years before the 7-day war. So that area was the killing field of the apartheid machinery. And this was noted by a writer, Christopher Meret, who stated that between 1987 and 1989, violence monitors recorded 4,458 incidents that resulted in hundreds of deaths and injuries, extensive damages to property in the greater Pietermaritzburg area, and more than 1,000 houses destroyed. This is where Harry Gwala, when he comes out of prison, he finds himself in. And he has to lead a people's war against the apartheid machinery and their impies. And yet he can't use his arms. So he's assisted to do anything. He never slept. The comrades from KZN will tell you. When men were displaced, he will ask them, oh, you are running away from the enemy. You are coming to take refuge in the community wall. Who's guarding the community wall? If the enemy comes here, are you going to run out again? He mobilized them to fight and defend their communities. So it is very important to appreciate that how the apartheid regime ill-treated him. He never revenged, but he taught the people how to be self-reliant, how to be independent, and how to fight and defend themselves. Any revolution that doesn't teach you how to fight is inadequate. So in other words, fighting is not just about fighting with guns. It's a gun. Yeah, military men. Yeah, it's us for the AK-47 and Stashki and all those RPKs, bazookas and stuff. Is there together? Nezeke us. Ipame schools of Konto Esizwe. Is there together? Ngakhathazeki ngalezo. Kodwa nina, you must occupy your class battles, class trenches, and fight in your community for your well-being. Of course, living amongst the masses, Comrade Gwala had a great grasp of the psyche of his people. He understood the immediate dangers and the action that is required to fight and protect his people. Some people, for instance, had characterized him, even denigrated him, and called him a warlord. But he followed Marxism and responded to the material condition affecting his people. And he couldn't look around away where these people were being killed. You know the battles, for instance, at one point, the ANC sent a delegation to go by Umkhuze. But you are getting too much involved in these battles. Batumela ukame Walter Sisulu ukame. Bakafika lapho Walter Ubaba Sisulu, who was a senior leader of the Communist Party, by the way. Walter Sisulu. If there's one member, by the way, that communists must measure themselves with in the context of South African Revolution, is Walter Sisulu. One day we need time to talk about him, because Walter Sisulu became a philosophy itself of our liberation movement. How to work, how to build institutions of the people. So they sent Walter Sisulu because he respected Walter Sisulu. When Sisulu arrived there, Umtobdala took him to the edge of the battleground. Immediately, imoto zabo figure, the impies from the other side started shooting. What, tell them back in Johannesburg that this is our daily existence. Yeah. So Walter Sisulu, when he went to give the report, what no, Nina Gwala, he's been attacked, Maka drive and yesterday. Now, in those circumstances, what should you do? That is why his condition post-prison, he immersed himself in the battles of his community. So every revolutionary must immerse themselves in the battles of their communities. They must remain with the masses. For instance, when the movement was debating negotiations for a democratic South Africa, he had massive engagement with Joe Slovo, particularly on his response to Slovo on negotiations, what room for compromises. And they had a massive debate which was captured in the SACP African Communist, fourth quarter of 1992, where, for instance, Gwala argued. He was warning against what he called, he was debating state power and constitutionalism. And he said he was warning the movement against winning the flag as opposed to real power. And he argued as follows, I quote him, "Negotiations must not reconcile the oppressed to neo-apartheid, dressed in the robes of a new constitution," and quoted George Bernard Shaw, who said, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions," close quote. So in other words, he raised important issues of the negotiations period about the pitfalls of a negotiated revolution. You know, comrades, in every negotiated revolution, you don't get everything. There are compromises. But he posed to Slovo some very serious questions that I want to leave with you. He said to Slovo, where is the class basis of the analysis? What are the class forces in this country? What is the character of the national liberation struggle? What is the mainstay of our revolution? In dealing with crucial matters of our time, Akawan, in fact, I must a close quote. but to say, in dealing with crucial matters of our time as revolutionaries, we must always ask these questions. Because there are forces that are arrayed against us, reactionary forces. And sometimes reactionary forces are funded, well funded. They even bring wrong lifestyles amongst us. When we arrived here, one of our comrades at the back there is a journalist. He confronts us. He says, yeah, Benson, yeah, you are driving in a VW. Chris Ali said, no Mercedes-Benz, and so forth and so forth. We were laughing about it. It was not a small matter. It's a real matter. One of the first tasks of Thomas Sankara when he took power in Burkina Faso, for instance, he downgraded government fleet to ordinary vehicles of the masses. If you go to Cuba, you'll find the same thing. The masses, public transport. In other words, the social services that the masses have should be the primary measurement of the leadership in government. If you have not reached that stage, you must know the revolution is too far. There must be enough public transport for the masses, so much that if I feel the need to have my own car out of my own savings, I can have it to satisfy my heart, but not because there's a problem with public transport. But in bourgeois society, we are competing now. The morality of capitalism is even such that if you start working and you don't own a car, you are nothing. You even make it an aspiration. I want to buy a car. I want to buy a car. So we need to find a way in which we change, our philosophy changes. Lastly, Comrade Chair, it's important to indicate that, sorry, because I mentioned many other things and therefore I deviated from some of the things that I felt I needed to raise with regard to Comrade Gwala. I just want to say the last few points about the task of our revolution today in the context of our Red October campaign and the elections that we face today. Firstly is that, comrades, we are faced with one of the most difficult periods in the reconstruction and development agenda of our country. This can perhaps be the most difficult since 1994. And we have seen aggregate decline in other key factors. For instance, deepening inequality, whether it's racial inequality, higher levels of unemployment, higher levels of poverty in our communities. Even racism rearing its head and beginning to be more confident, disrupting us and creating the point that Unopala was warning us against. Even tensions amongst us, one people. And therefore, the economic aggregates in our country are not impressive at the moment. The revolution itself has suffered some setbacks, maybe even some serious setbacks, one may say. We as revolutionaries, our task is to rejuvenate ourselves and not get consumed by the setbacks that we have suffered. Fidel Castro says, if a revolutionary succumbs to the conditions of imperialism, of capital, he is not yet well strengthened ideologically to understand that despite these conditions, we need to regroup, relook at ourselves, undergo a self-introspection and a critical process to strengthen our ability to act for the revolution on behalf of the masses, to mobilize the masses to be with us in the revolution. But we as revolutionaries, or aspirant revolutionaries, because in any case, only the next generation will declare whether we are revolutionaries or not. See, now we can only aspire to become revolutionaries. The judgment will come from history. But if we don't act today, history will condemn us. Because we would have failed in our revolutionary duty, we would have occupied revolutionary positions and platforms and misused them or never understood them. Yet we accepted to the positions of leadership. That is why we must rejuvenate ourselves, rebuild ourselves, renew ourselves. In the renewal project, confront the real enemy of the people, the capitalist system. We can't mollycoddle capitalism, Makaban. Capitalism is not our friend. The inequalities that we are suffering in this country is a consequence of this capitalist system. And on the one hand, we have seen where some of the setbacks are self-inflicted. We have, of course, accumulated problems in our case. But there are those that are self-inflicted. The inability to act when it's possible to act. The abilities all the time to be considerate of the interest of the bourgeoisie than the interest of the working class. Or sometimes even comparison of the interest of the working class and that of the bourgeoisie. Uzwe the strategy and tactics like ANC sichinja. In membership base, icabanga ukuthi isilungu. Ngicabanga ukuthi ama-resolutions wethu isilungu. National democratic struggle, new motive forces of the revolution, including the BEE as a motive force. A motive force in revolution is fought by classes, not stratas. Stratas are mobilized around classes. So in our case, human beings, social revolutions is between the working class and the bourgeois class, the capitalist class. This is the real revolution, these two forces. Other stratas, whether it's the middle strata, the women, the youth, must belong to either of these. If the youth are mobilized into the strata or the women are mobilized into the strata or into the class of capitalism, they will defeat the overwhelming need of the revolution to free the masses. And therefore, we always have to be conscious about these two factors. But some of these things, like I say, are self-inflicted, some a consequence of colonialism and so forth. But one might say, we cannot allow this revolution to adopt minimalist measures, always cautious. When are we going to sharpen class contradictions? That's the task of the revolution. Because once you sharpen class contradictions, you are able to develop a way forward that is clearer. Manje revolution sometimes. Because the working class are decisive. We accept all conditions, all manners of conditions. For instance, sometimes these rating agencies from Europe and the US, they can say, don't do that. In terms of policy, we reverse because they will punish us. And we say, no, we are operating in an international economic system where. The revolution must sharpen class contradictions all the time. That's its task. How are you going to move forward without sharpened class contradictions? How is the working class going to hate the capitalist system if they don't know that this system is their primary enemy? Imperialism. How is it going to happen when, for instance, we don't care about our culture? American culture is the dominant culture in our society. The youth aspire to go to New York and America because they think going there, you have arrived. Therefore, Makaban, when a revolution reaches this period, this dangerous period, it must look on itself. It must find answers from itself. And that's where the reflections comes in to rebuild the National Democratic Revolution. In doing so, we need to look into the great moral idea of the revolution, because in any case, the revolution is nothing else but a great moral idea. That moral idea that inspired our generation of leaders, our forefathers who fought in the front wars of frontiers, who defended this land against colonialism. Nelson Mandela and others who came later on to complete this task of our revolution. Chris Hani, who martyred for the final victory in the decisive April 1994 vote, that today we must continue that path. In doing so, we'll remember properly the contributions of a man like Che Guevara. That it was not in vain, but it was for all classes. It was an international struggle against oppression and brutalization by the capitalist system. That way we will honor Comrade Gwala proper. And to do so, the revolution must be truthful. If the revolution is truthful and doesn't tell lies, it will always be part of the people. And because the revolution doesn't tell lies and is always truthful and is amongst the people will always trust the revolution. They will correct it when it's deviating. In so doing, the revolution will succeed. Without that, the revolution can degenerate, can be diverted, and the revolution can be defeated. That's why you must stay conscientized. Long live the member of Comrade Gwala. Long live. Long live. Forward to socialism. Forward. Forward. Down with capitalism. Down. Down. Amandla. Thank you very much. I'm now mandated to do an announcement, although it's too unfair after you've spoken for so long to be given a new task. I'm told, comrade, that we have canvassed 252 people, although there's no indication of how many of these people have agreed to vote for the ANC. Oh. 252 people have agreed to vote for the ANC in today's canvass. Well done, Mr. I must thank you as well, the volunteers, because you are the real soul of our movement, the volunteers, and keep up the good work. Amandla, thank you very much.
Comrades, we are about to sit down, Comrade Mali. Salapanzi, Comrade Mali, Dallas Lap. Kusayenziwe leadership. Yes, but bazavotela ANC bonke. Yes, and they are causing. Okay, comrades, let's get back to the agenda. Yes, 252 people are going to vote for the ANC. And also the profound lecture by our DGS, first DGS Comrade Soli. That means that we must grasp what has been said to us. Make sure that we practice what we have been getting through theory. Practice and theory together. Comrades, the next thing I'm going to give it to Comrade Sylvia, which is our mayor, for the vote of thanks. And the other thing that we should not forget to do as we are here today, we know that we have a task as the branch leaders and district leaders to build our branches. Let's make sure that we build our branches, hoping that each and everyone who's here has got a branch in good standing. Yes. And you are going to recruit people so that we can push and continue with the struggle of socialism. So I'm going to give over now to Comrade Sylvia for the vote of thanks. After that, I've seen there is food prepared. There is food prepared for us, comrades. Then we are going to eat and disperse.
SACP viva! Viva! Viva SACP viva! Viva! Viva Sanko viva! Viva! Qina mhlali qina! Viva! Qina mhlali qina! Viva! Let me start the leadership. Apetafileni, our first deputy secretary, Comrade Soli, nesigaba sakho osenaso namhlanje apha. Our comrade leadership, Comrade Benson, from the province nesigaba sakho. Comrade Sanko, nesigaba sakho. Qina mhlali qina. Qina mhlali qina. Inkokheli yethu elapha from uPop Group nazo zonke i-members ezilapha zikaPop. You can see they're at the back. Molweni nani comrades. Our leaders from this district. Our leaders from the district, Comrade Lucky, and our chairperson, Comrade Balo. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Molweni maqabane. Zonke, all our sub-regions and all the other leaders that are here today, all the Red Brigades, all the volunteers of the ANC. My task here is a very simple one. It's just to come and thank you, comrades, for the day. Comrades, I'm a bit emotional as I'm standing here, and I've read some messages from the comrades that were not able to attend my leaders. And some of the leaders are out of town, attended funerals, and some of them attended weddings. We all know that because of the COVID, the weddings and everything was put on hold. So I think all the people are starting to get married now. But we've sent our apologies because we are all invited, even the chief whip, because I received a message here saying that, wow, comrades, not even one of you all the chief whip as well, you are not coming to attend. But we explained how important today is for us here in our sub-region and this particular ward as well. Comrades, I think, and I love it, I like it. My comrade, ndiyaxolisa comrade, ndiyabulela kakhulu nakuwe comrade Soso, nesigaba sakho, and our comrade there, enkosi kakhulu comrades for attending this program today here. And we really had to fight for this program. But I'm very grateful for the secretary that we have here, Comrade Ayanda Sonkai. That guy, he knows how to fight. Akapheli manje likomanisi ya alibuyimfa and liya addressa ngqo into akathethi emva kwakho uyaku-invite so that azokuxela le nto afuna ukuxela yona and then akuxela bandilwanga masiqhubeke ke sisebenze. Thank you very much, Comrade Ace, for leadership yakho ebranchini yethu. I think we had a branch yethu, I think it was a few years ago, but ekwameni kwexesha kwathuleka ne-SACP, but the comrade uyawabuya wathi sodolophu. Now that ukhona in charge, I think it's time ukuba siphinde sibuye lapho sivela khona. Amakomanisi ayadingeka kuyonakala apha. So we need to go back to the people. Amakomanisi ngawona wona that knows ukuthi amandla semasebeni kufuneka kuqalwe khona. Ukuthi le councillors ezikhoyo ziyakwazi bazi accounting. Singayivulwa zibhunqe nje. And to challenge ezinye izinto ezenzekayo. And then I think mandibulele man, we've got a comrade apha elithela afika, our comrade Gwala. Comrade Gwala, ndiyabulela nakuwe, my comrade. uthe xa afikayo wathi I live in the Western Cape and in the sub-region. But into yokuqala endifune uyazi uba ndingawafumana phaa amakomanisi apha around. And then he was sent ukuba khambe uyokhangela uComrade Silver noComrade Ayanda uzawudibana nabo. And umsebenzi awenzayo, as you can see, inkulu kangakanani, I don't want to say informal settlement as the Comrade said, no. The squatter camp, how big the squatter camp is. And then there's people ngapha kweVal, ne? But lo comrade uhamba kuzo zonke zendawo to make sure he reach each and every one ophaya, each and every voter, and he makes sure ukuthi uza kuthi with those names and say, please comrades, make sure ukuthi nenza something about imeko yababantu that are living in that conditions. And comrade is not easy, but we are fighting. As you all know that we take over a municipality in the end of 2019. 3 months later, COVID, yes, went. It was not easy because the first 3 years was governed by the opposition, and we came in end of 2019. 2020, sakonxeka. All of you know that we are all over the media, SIU rating offices zethu. Because makufika ukhongolozi soloko suspect ukuthi zingamasela, and they always want to question everything esiyenzayo, and benza sure ukuthi bamisa ngqi everything because siya investigatewa, we can't do anything, but everything izinto esisebenzisayo esikwazi ukuthi sizisebenzise uba sizise iservice ebantwini, but nalapho asaphela amandla senza sure. Yes, comrade, I will translate, comrade. So, comrades, really to be standing here today, I call go 4 o'clock. Now the load shedding is starting at 4. Amandla comrade, samthathu umasipala ngo-2019 baphelayo, and thanks to these comrades abesoloko bekunye nathi babe sisilwa senza sure our first ward esithathe back from the opposition was in 2018, the second one was in the end of 2019 September, and all of you comrades know how long we struggled to get into the council because the leader that was there before bengafuna unikezela amandla, bengafuna unikezela. He made sure he delayed the meeting apha kufuneka behande over khona, but we are here, standing here, and I want to thank all the comrades that assisted us. I think Ward 5 is also one of our wards here in Lemets Bay. I know, you know what, I was very emotional to go to our squatter camp. I have to get used to it.
The month is
yes. We go into our squatter camp in Ward 5. Monday. I think Tuesday. It was Tuesday. Wednesday. Thank you very much, Comrade Mike, and the comrades from Clan William, who accompanied me there to meet our comrades there. As you know, all know comrades, we are in the Western Cape, and you know racism is still a headache, especially here in the West Coast and in our sub-region as well. It is very heartbreaking. In 2021, for 2021, to find out that there's still people that's being oppressed and there's still people that are being told when applying for jobs that these jobs are not for you. You are not from the Western Cape, you are from the Eastern Cape. So you are only going to get the temporary jobs. and the permanent jobs are about our kids. And that's what the message the opposition is giving to our people. And really, comrades, I think we really have to admit, we failed those comrades there in those areas. And we were very emotional to go to comrades abakhala ngola hlobo while we are leading. And comrades, we really apologized and said, I think in every branch, that's why it is very important to make sure, comrades, ukuthi i-structures SACP zibakhona kuzo zonke branches, so that sikwazi address this kind of problems xa zivelayo, and not to wait until we come to knock at the doors and then abantu bakuthi basixela how they were suffering under opposition. Because the ward councillor there is EDA. The other wards are fortunate because there is some PR councillors in their wards. Like here, the ward councillor in this ward is the DA, is a DA ward councillor. But we are here as PR councillors here in Ward 1, because our chief was deployed in Ward 1 and I was deployed here, and all the other sub-regions do have EPR councillors, but not Ward 5. But because the comrades were so angry, we had to go there and apologize for not going to them and failing them. We know we couldn't hold meetings because of the COVID, but I'm not using that as an excuse, because we still have to go to the people and address the issues that our people are facing. But I'm happy to see the comrades that are here. In the morning they call me and say, comrades Odolop, we want to come and join you. And they are here, those comrades are here. And Koska Kulma comrades Pangasemba from Ward 5. Amanda! And they said, comrades, after you visit us, and they started working. And the candidate there has reported that he received the street sheets, so the comrades is working there. Thank you very much, comrades, for that. So please, comrades, here are the street sheets, and we have to make sure these street sheets do reach our LET and the district office and even our provincial office. I really want to thank each and every one of you comrades that are here. All the volunteers, each and everyone in this room, for coming up today in numbers and support us. Comrades from Genesis Swartz branch, Molweni apha ngasemva, Comrade Maton, Kai Maton, thank you very much for coming, and we just want you to launch the SACP there in your branch. I think you've taken the forms there at the back, and some of you already fill in your forms, Yamakomanisi, because we want to go and launch very soon there, comrades. Viva Ward 3, viva! Viva! Viva Ward 3, viva! Viva! I think, comrades, you see for yourselves, ukuthi makufika amakomanisi, kuyacaca, kuyabonakala. And the videos of today is all over in the groups. And as while I was sitting here, I was checking what the people are saying. Bavuselelekile abantu. And they want to join the Red Brigades. They want to join the team to go and canvass. Yes, they want to join the winning team. And we are winning, comrades. We are winning. We are taking back all our awards that were taken by the DA in 2016. We are taking back all our awards. So thank you very much, comrades. My job was just to come here and say thank you for all of you. My grandfather used to say, ukuba uthunyiwe uyothetha into, thetha le nto ithunyiweyo. Suba ubhuda uthetha yonke into. So I was only asked to come and say thank you very much, comrades.
Here is the last announcement. Sit down, comrades. The food is gonna get you on your seats. Yes, there is food prepared.
You are 31 minutes over. I'll charge you R100 per minute.
Look, thank you very much.
No.